Section 13 Janamejaya said, while living thus disguised in the city of the Matsyas, what did those descendants of the Kuru race endued with great prowess do, O regenerate one? Vaisampayana said, hear, O king, what those descendants of Kuru did while they dwelt thus in disguise in the city of the Matsyas, worshipping the king their half. By the grace of the sage Trinavindu and of the high soul Lord of Justice, the Pandavas continued to live in unrecognized by others in the city of Virata. O Lord of men, Yudhishthira as courtier made himself agreeable to Virata and his sons as also to all the Matsyas, an adept in the mysteries of the dice. The son of Pandu caused them to play at a dice according to his pleasure, and made them sit together in the dice hall like a row of birds bound in a string. And that tiger among men, King Yudhishthira, the just unknown to the monarch, distributed among his brothers in due proportion the wealth he won from Virata, and Bhimasena on his part sold to Yudhishthira for price meat and viands of various kinds which he obtained from the king. And Arjuna distributed among all his brothers the proceeds of worn-out clothes which he earned in the inner apartments of the palace. And Sahadeva too, who was disguised as a coward, gave milk, curds and clarified butter to his brothers. And Nakula also shared with his brothers the wealth the king gave him, satisfied with his management of the horses. And Draupadi herself, in a pitiable condition, looked after all those brothers and behaved in such a way as to remain unrecognized, and thus ministering all unto one another's wants. Those mighty warriors lived in the capital of Virata, as hidden from view as if they were once more in the mother's womb. And those lords of men, the sons of Pandu, apprehensive of danger from the son of Dhritarashtra, continued to dwell there in concealment, watching over their wife Draupadi. And after 3 months had passed away, in the fourth, the grand festival in honor of the divine Brahma, which was celebrated with pomp in the country of the Matsyas, came off, and there came athletes from all quarters by thousands, like hosts of celestials, to the abode of Brahma or of Shiva to witness that festival. And they were endued with huge bodies and great prowess, like the demons called Kalakanjas, and elated with their prowess and proud of their strength, they were highly honored by the king, and their shoulders and waists and necks were like those of lions, and their bodies were very clean, and their hearts were quite at ease, and they had many a time won success in the lists in the presence of kings. And amongst them there was one who towered above the rest, and challenged them all to a combat. And there was none that dared approach him as he proudly stalked in the arena. And when all the athletes stood sad and dispirited, the king of the Matsyas made him fight with his cook. And urged by the king, Bhima made up his mind reluctantly, for he could not openly disobey the royal behest. And that tiger among men, when having worshipped the king, entered the spacious arena, pacing with the careless steps of a daughter of a tiger. And the son of Kunti then girded up his loins to the great delight of the spectators. And Bhima then summoned to the combat that athlete known by the name of Jimuta, who was like unto the Asura Vritra, whose prowess was widely known. And both of them were possessed of great courage, and both were endued with terrible prowess. And they were like a couple of infuriate and huge-bodied elephants, each 60 years old. And those brave tigers among men went cheerfully engaged in a wrestling combat, desirous of vanquishing each other. And terrible was the encounter that took place between them, like the clash of the thunderbolt against the stony mountain breast. And both of them were exceedingly powerful and extremely delighted at each other's strength, and desirous of vanquishing each other. Each stood eager to take advantage of his adversary's lapse, and both were greatly delighted. And both looked like infuriate elephants of prodigious size, and various were the modes of attack and defense that they exhibited with their clenched fists, and each dashed against the other and flung his adversary to a distance, and each cast the other down and pressed him close to the ground, and each caught up again and squeezed the other in his arms, and each threw the other violently off his place by boxing him on the breast, and each caught the other by the legs and whirling him round threw him down on the ground, and they slapped each other with their palms that struck as hard as the thunderbolt, and they also struck each other with their outstretched fingers, and stretching them out like spears, thrust the nails into each other's body, and they gave each other violent kicks, and they struck knee and head against head, producing the crash of one stone against another, and in this manner that furious combat between those warriors raged on without weapons, sustained mainly by the power of their arms and their physical and mental energy, to the infinite delight of the concourse of spectators. And all people, O King, took deep interest in that encounter of those powerful wrestlers, who fought like Indra and the Asura Vritra, and they cheered both of them with loud acclamations of applause. And the broad-chested and long-armed experts in wrestling then pulled and pressed and whirled and hurled down each other and struck each other with their knees, expressing all the while their scorn for each other in loud voices. And they began to fight with their bare arms in this way, which were like spiked maces of iron. And at last the powerful and mighty armed Bhima, the slayer of his foes, shouting aloud, seized the vociferous athlete by the arms, even as the lion seizes the elephant, and taking him up from the ground and holding him aloft, began to whirl him round, to the great astonishment of the assembled athletes and the people of Matsya. And having whirled him round and round 100 times till he was insensible, the strong-armed Vrikodara dashed him to death on the ground. And when the brave and renowned Jimuta was thus killed, Virata and his friends were filled with great delight, and in the exuberance of his joy, the noble-minded king rewarded Vallava then and there with the liberality of Kuvera, and killing numerous athletes and many other men possessed of great bodily strength. He pleased the king very much, and when no one could be found there to encounter him in the lists, the king made him fight with tigers and lions and elephants. And the king also made him battle with furious and powerful lions in the harem for the pleasure of the ladies. And Arjuna too pleased the king and all the ladies of the inner apartments by singing and dancing. And Nakula pleased Virata, that best of kings, by showing him fleet and well-trained steeds that followed him wherever he went. And the king, gratified with him, rewarded him with ample presents. And beholding Aran Sahadeva, a herd of well-trained bullocks, Virata, that bull among men, bestowed upon him also wealth of divers kinds. And O King, Draupadi, distressed to see all those warriors suffer pain, sighed incessantly, and it was in this way that those eminent persons lived there in disguise, rendering services on to King Virata. Thus ends the 13th section in the Samayapalana Parva of the Virata Parva.